Hello and welcome to another jog vlog session. This one is going to be building on from the last session, which looked at erosion dominant landforms found at the coast, where we're going to be now looking at those landforms that are created by transportation and deposition as their dominant process. And really, by transportation, we genuinely just mean longshore drift, because longshore drift is the critical component when it comes to actually creating the landforms that you're going to be faced with today. Now, in the last session, you did a lot of listening to me explaining and going through all the processes that work together to create cliff and wave cut platform, bay and headland, cave arch, stack stump. And you also got a nice handy little revision rhyme poem that went along with it to help you try and put those processes together and see how they interact to then change that landscape. Today you're going to be working a bit more independently, but you're not going to completely escape my revision rhymes, I'm afraid to tell you. So you're going to be looking at how longshore drift, which we'll do a quick recap of, and deposition combine to create distinctive coastal landforms. Now these landforms are a little bit less dramatic maybe than the erosion landforms we encountered in the last session, and they include beaches, spits and bars, although I would say spits and bars are incredibly kind of impressive, especially when viewed from above. So longshore drift is a critical component of these particular landforms, and longshore drift is worth recapping because pupils do tend to struggle with longshore drift. Now there is a video on YouTube that you can watch, and there's probably again loads that explain longshore drift, but the key is that it's the movement of sediment. Now longshore drift is driven by the prevailing wind, so you can see the swash, which is the direction the waves will travel onto the beach, is the same angle as the direction of that prevailing wind, and they'll take sediment with it. And that sediment then gets drawn back towards the sea under the force of gravity. Okay, that's why it's straight, because the wind is not affecting that here. It's absorbed into the beach itself, and again that water just drains away and pulls back under the force of gravity, and we call that the backwash. And this swash and backwash continue, and all the while they take little bit by little bit of sediment as they go. So overall, the sediment is being moved down the coastline. Now that's all very well and good in a straight line coastline, and it's not going to see a great deal of difference, presuming that you're getting the same sediment coming on as you're losing on the other side. But that's obviously not always the case, and the coastline isn't a straight line. It's very, very rarely a straight line. So if this continued in one direction, but the coast changed direction a little bit, then you might find that this deposition actually continues away from the coast, and that can create certain features which we call spits and bars. Okay, so we're going to start to look at that into more depth now. So beaches, and this is what you probably associate when you think of beaches, this lovely sandy, fine material beach, which is not really created by much more than deposition, because beaches are literally just where sediment deposits. And in the last session, actually, we saw beaches forming in bays because there was less wind, because the headland sheltered it, greater friction as it accumulated vertically, and so therefore greater friction. And so you started to get a bay building up as a beach building up in a bay. But beaches form they don't just form in bays, they form lots of other parts of the coast. So you need to consider why some beaches maybe deposit material, and other reasons why sea will deposit material as it reaches the coast. But the sediment has to come from somewhere, and so when it comes to how processes work together in the formation of beaches, you need to really talk about the erosion of a cliff, or a bit of mass movement from a cliff collapse event, because that actually provides the sediment which then gets taken by longshore drift and then dumped onto a beach. So that's where you can tie in other processes. You don't just have to talk about deposition. Spits, and there's the brilliant example of a spit. This is called spurn head. Spurn, S-P-U-R-N, not sperm, but it does look a bit like one, I will grant you. But this is Spurn Head, and this is just essentially it's near Hull. Okay, and the river that enters the sea here is the Humber, and this is the Humber estuary, and this side is the North Sea. And what's happened is longshore drift has happened all the way down the coast, and the land of the coast stops here, but the longshore drift hasn't stopped. It's curved like this. Get out of the way, you silly thing. It's curved around this direction, and that's because the prevailing wind is pushing it in that direction. But it's created this incredible stretch of land, and this looks small on this screen, but this is big. You know, actually, if you look at this little square there, that is like a building, and there's buildings there, and there's an entire road that goes all the way down. It's a nature reserve here, and there's a lifeboat station there because it's a great position to go and rescue people. But this is Spurn Head, a great example of a spit. But we've got spits in the north of Norfolk. Blakeney Spit is another example. It doesn't look as clear cut as this one because Blakeney Spit behind it has developed salt marsh, which now makes it look like it's kind of part of the landscape. But if you see do a Google Earth search of Blakeney Spit, you'll see you've got actually a curved shape of beach with like a curved end, and that is a spit. And a bar is, according to this exam board at GCSE level, because this is actually a bit wrong, but a bar is where a spit leaves the mainland and then rejoins the mainland. Now that's actually not really what we call a bar. This is actually called a barrier beach, okay, or a bay head bar is probably the more accurate description. A bar normally you'd find maybe out to sea. Okay, it'll be a ridge of sand, and you won't even see it often. You'll only see waves breaking before they reach the coast. But in the language of the exam board, this is a bar. So it's basically a spit that gets back to the land somehow, and then behind it you don't get salt marsh, you get something called a lagoon. Okay, so this one, the information you need for this is all on 365. I am not going to sit and yabber away, but what you need for each of these features, beaches, spits and bars, is you need a bullet pointed list of what it's like, the characteristics. So can be sand, can be shingle, deposited sediment, can be steep, can be narrow, whatever. Spits, what the characteristics are, curved tip, doesn't rejoin the coast, salt marsh behind it, whatever it might be. For spits, then bars you could say again rejoins the land, lagoon behind. Excuse me. So that's the characteristics. The most important thing though for each is that you've got a detailed description of its formation, and where you can, try and incorporate different processes. So mention longshore drift. Don't just mention deposition. Tell me what is causing the deposition to take place, or what could be causing the deposition to take place. And try and, again, think of it as a sequence, a process. Alright, now I'm going to leave you to that, so you need to pause the screen, find the resource from 365, or come into school and ask me for it, or email me and I'll send it to you, and then complete your notes for beaches, spits and bars, and then I'm going to subject you to a bit of poetry. Okay, so hopefully you've got your notes in full on beaches, spits and bars. I'm going to provide you a poem that specifies spits and bars, because beaches is an unlikely question in an exam. Okay, prepare yourselves, people. Spits and bars formation is quite a big section. They have to have coastlines that change in direction. Then there's the process of longshore drift. The movement of sediment is a spit's greatest gift. The prevailing wind has quite a big say. The angle of swash is pushed in that way. It takes in its waves some small bits of sand, which move with the waves. They go hand in hand. The backwash comes back straight to the sea. Zigzags keep going, to you now to me. The zigzagging happens all down the coast, but overall direction interests us most. With sediment moving in a straight line, a change in the coastline occurs time to time. Longshore drift continues and goes out to sea, depositing sand, and over time you will see. It builds up and rises out of the sea quite a bit. This is the start of a wonderful spit. Behind it is sheltered, and some plants can grow. A salt marsh can form, as some seeds can self-sow. The end can be curved because of the breeze. Dawlish Warren an example of just one of these. Now bars are the same except for one fact. They leave the main coastline but still travel back. It links up two headlands, and last in this tune, behind them becomes a tidal lagoon. Okay, now what I haven't really mentioned in this is I haven't talked about why deposition takes place. I've given a good detailed description of longshore drift, but really you need to be focusing on why does deposition take place, or better still, where does the sediment come from in the first place, like further up the coast, etc., from eroding or mass movement cliffs. Okay, so this one is obviously a much shorter section in terms of my speaking, but hopefully the main task took you a bit of time to do if you've got some detailed notes. And feel free to supplement them with any other additional research you want to do. I can't stress how important it is that you have more than one process for every one of your landforms, whether it's for erosion landforms or these deposition and longshore drift landforms. You need to try and look at more than one process, because an exam board will expect you to know how different multiple factors work together to create these features. Okay, so that's the end of that session. Thank you very much for listening. And next time I will be talking to you about, what am I talking to you about next time? I'm talking to you about physical and human causes of erosion and retreat. Okay, not a very interesting session next time, so prepare yourselves. All right, thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.